Greetings and welcome to the Culture Ward, where we dissect and dismantle pop culture in all its forms. The upcoming Star Wars movie, The Mandalorian Grogu, is set to hit theaters in May of this year. And while it will be the first official theatrically released movie in the Star Wars universe since 2019's The Rise of Skywalker, a wait of 7 years, there is surprisingly little fanfare or excitement. Recently, a new promo aired during the Super Bowl, and it too was met with mostly apathy. Should Disney Lucasfilm be worried, or is this a normal reaction to a movie promotion this far in advance? Join us as we discuss The Mandalorian and Grogu. But before we begin, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and help us grow the channel. As always, it really means a lot to us. And don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoy the content. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. The original Star Wars movie, written and directed by George Lucas, was released on May 25, 1977, and quickly became a cultural landmark and a household name. It spawned multiple sequels, a merchandising empire, and an enormous expanded universe of books, graphic novels, and games. More importantly, the legacy of Star Wars would reverberate through the entertainment industry for decades to come. It has since become one of the highest-grossing media franchises of all time, and arguably the most valuable IP in history. Retroactively titled Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, the original film was followed by The Empire Strikes Back in 1980, also known as Star Wars Episode 5, and Return of the Jedi, Episode 6, in 1983. These first three films are now known as the original trilogy, and most fans, and honest critics, still consider this the best era of the franchise, by a long shot. Even before the release of the first Star Wars film, the universe appeared in print media, with the novelization of Star Wars subtitled From the Adventures of Luke Skywalker being published in November of 1976, several months before the movie's theatrical release. Then, within months of the movie's release, the expanded universe was born with the first story in Marvel Comics, in Star Wars No. 7, published in January of 1978. The Expanded Universe, or EU, would continue to grow, encompassing all officially licensed Star Wars stories set outside the events of the theatrical films, including novels, comics, video games. Lucasfilm maintained internal continuity with all of these stories, and they were all considered canon. The EU includes dozens of novels and short stories, along with comics, animated shows, and multiple video games. After the original trilogy, there was an extended period of time when no new original material was developed by George Lucas for the Star Wars universe. There were 2 short-lived animated shows during the 1980s, including Droids and Ewoks, but it wasn't until the early 1990s that Lucas began planning for additional films. While he had written rough outlines for both a prequel trilogy and sequel trilogy when he wrote the original Star Wars, he had decided in the early 80s not to make any more sequels after Jedi, due in large part to limitations of film media at the time.
When I finished the first trilogy, I figured that was the end of Star Wars. That's what I set out to do, and I finished it.
However, by the early 1990s, CGI had begun to show promise, and Lucas thus began planning on some new entries.
15 years later, I had the technology. ILM had developed digital technology to a point after Jurassic Park that I could actually consider doing some of the things that were thought about in the backstory. And so I said, well, do I finish Star Wars or do I go off and do these other things?
Good luck, everybody. Now let's kick ass. 77, take 1.
And action!
Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was thus released in May of 1999, 16 years after the release of Return of the Jedi. And while reviews were mixed, it was a huge success and marked another cultural milestone, and served to revive the franchise for a whole new generation. That was followed by Attack of the Clones in 2002 and Revenge of the Sith in 2005. Dubbed the prequel trilogy, these were to be the last Star Wars movies that Lucas would be involved with. Now, Lucas did develop and produce the animated film and subsequent animated series The Clone Wars beginning in 2008, which focused on stories primarily set between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, following Anakin and Obi-Wan during the 3-year gap between the films. And both the film and the series have been well received. Then the unthinkable happened. Lucas sold his legacy and empire, Lucasfilm and all of its accompanying content, to Disney in 2012 for the paltry sum of $4 billion, a move that he seemingly regretted almost instantly. Almost just as instantly, Disney Lucasfilm decanonized the entire expanded universe, relabeling everything within as Star Wars Legends, and instead centralizing all continuity to a division of the company, who would thenceforth go about raiding and bastardizing content from the former EU, but we'll save that conversation for another day. Anyway, under Disney's management, the abominable sequel trilogy was immediately greenlit and went into production, with Episode 7, The Force Awakens, releasing in December 2015 and becoming one of the highest-grossing films of all time. It had been a decade since the previous theatrical release, and as expected, this film was yet another cultural milestone. Of course, the film wasn't that great, and kind of squandered some golden opportunities as well as destroying the character of Han Solo, but it nevertheless felt familiar, and thus re-enlivened the franchise once again. At least for a while, because then came The Last Jedi, which subverted fans' expectations and ruined all the legacy characters and cheapened and dismantled pretty much the entire saga of Anakin and Luke Skywalker. This movie still somehow made over $1 billion, but notably lost nearly half the audience from The Force Awakens, and managed to anger and alienate a large portion of the fan base. The destruction of the film franchise was complete with the release of The Rise of Skywalker in 2019, which, to its credit, tried desperately to course correct after the stupid bullshit of The Last Jedi, but ended up as a huge mess of a movie that made no sense and further undid the legacy of the original and prequel trilogies.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
You serious?
Indeed, this movie nearly succeeded in completely killing the franchise once and for all. Besides the sequel trilogy, Disney also produced Rogue One, the only Disney Star Wars film that was worth a shit in my opinion, and Solo: A Star Wars Story, a box office bomb, making it one of the only Star Wars movies to lose money. Additionally, numerous series have been released on Disney+, including Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, and The Acolyte, which range from bad to absolutely awful in that order.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
On the plus side, though, there was Andor, which ran for 2 seasons, both of which were actually pretty good. And finally, there was the flagship of Disney+, The Mandalorian, which first premiered in 2019 and ran for 3 seasons, with Season 3 ending in 2023. Now, The Mandalorian is set a few years after the events of Return of the Jedi and the fall of the Galactic Empire, and it follows a Mandalorian bounty hunter named Din Djarin, often referred to as Mando, as he carries out various missions. The first season revolves around Mando's mission to retrieve a child for an Imperial remnant, and it turns out that child is actually a juvenile version of the type of creature Yoda was, earning him the fan-made nickname of Baby Yoda. Once Mando retrieves the child, though, he actually betrays his client and decides to protect the child and return it to its kind. So the rest of the season revolves around Mando trying to protect the child while being hunted by former Imperial officer Moff Gideon, who seeks to exploit the child's connection to the Force. Through the course of the events of the season, Mando and the child bond. Now, the show was an immediate hit. With a mix of episodic adventures and an overarching story, this show actually felt more like Star Wars than any of the sequel films or Solo ever could. The scenery felt lived in, the action was organic and gritty, and while the constant fetch quests do get a bit repetitive at times, overall, this was one of the best live-action Star Wars productions in a long time. So Season 2, released in 2020, picks up right where Season 1 ended, and follows Mando and the child, who we find out is named Grogu, in their journey across the galaxy to find the Jedi, in order to reunite Grogu with his people. There was a lot more fan service in this season, introducing fan favorites like Boba Fett and Ahsoka Tano, and a surprise cameo near the end that drew, well, mixed reactions. Season 2 remained strong with a familiar feel, and most of the fan service was done well enough. However, Grogu, who was originally meant as a plot device in Season 1, became a full-blown gimmick in Season 2. Everyone loved Baby Yoda so much that he became a focus of the show. Unfortunately, instead of developing his character, they just leaned into his cuteness, and we never really saw him grow as a character at all. Honestly, it began to get a little tiring seeing Grogu do cute things every episode, but never progress as a character. But it wasn't all bad, and the ending of Season 2 should have been the last we saw of him, at least for a while. Well, Season 3, well, let's just say this one kind of sucked. Grogu returned with Mando due to the events of the Book of Boba Fett. That's right, if you didn't see it, in Boba Fett's 7-episode show, 2 entire episodes are focused solely on Mando and Grogu in order to reunite the duo for Season 3 of The Mandalorian. It wasn't just dirty, it was stupid. And Season 3 of The Mandalorian kinda sidelines Mando and focuses on some stupid plot to unite the scattered Mandalorians from across the galaxy and reclaim their homeworld with the help of the stronger, smarter, and better at everything girl Mandalorian, Bo-Katan. Poor pacing, low stakes, and underdeveloped characters are just some of the problems with this season, making it a disjointed and disappointing slog.
Could I perhaps hold the baby, please?
He doesn't take kindly to strangers.
Oh, you're so fast. Yeah.
I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
Now, rumors have it they were planning on doing a Season 4 of The Mandalorian, but low ratings for Season 3 and ever-dwindling interest forced them to scrap those plans. Instead, they decided to turn that would-be 4th season into a feature film, announced in January of 2024. And it would be the first feature film in the Star Wars universe since the Rise of Skywalker in 2019. Meaning, it should be a huge cultural event, right? Well, maybe not. So right from the start, when the movie was first announced as The Mandalorian and Grogu, there was immediate backlash, calling the title bland, simplistic, lazy, and flat-out uncreative. Or as someone famously noted, it is, quote, the dumbest fucking Star Wars title ever. I mean, really, most normal people thought this must just be a placeholder title. But nope, it's the actual title of the first Star Wars movie in 7 years. Enthusiasm hasn't really improved much since then either. While there was some very limited promise with some of the promotional art, such as this movie poster that looks pretty cool, it was countered by the release of the first teaser trailer a few months ago. Now, there's nothing in it that seemed particularly cringe-inducing, however, it felt flat, boring, low energy, and really just looked like another run-of-the-mill episode of the show, with few elements that appeared cinematic. And the focus on Grogu's cuteness and merchandising potential has begun to drive people away. Basically, nothing about the teaser served to build any excitement for this project, and at its best, seems to invoke apathy and, well, indifference. It was made worse on Super Bowl Sunday last week when another ad dropped.
Sometimes we choose our path. Other times the path chooses us. Through it all, we keep pushing forward.
This time it was just a parody of the Budweiser Clydesdale commercials, with Mando and Grogu driving a carriage led by Tauntauns, but lacking any actual film footage or context or any hints whatsoever about what this movie is even going to be about, despite the launch being only a few months away. At this point, the marketing for the movie has looked more like an extended toy commercial than marketing for a major blockbuster Star Wars movie. Overall, this commercial, which presumably cost more than $10 million to air during the Super Bowl, did nothing but fuel and broaden the sense of apathy surrounding the movie. And listen, this movie didn't have to be the greatest Star Wars film ever created. None of the Disney-era films or shows needed to be better than the original trilogy. The Force Awakens broke box office records and reignited hype in the franchise for a new generation by just being extremely mediocre at best. The brand itself did most of the heavy lifting. And this movie, being the first theatrical release of a Star Wars movie in 7 years, should be a pop culture milestone, the highly anticipated blockbuster event. But it's not. Instead of applause and expectation, it has so far been met with deafening indifference. Over the past several years, with a few rare exceptions, Disney has churned out poorly written slop that has driven away a large portion of the fan base, at times seemingly intentionally. And now they are left with a few sycophants that will seal clap at anything with the Star Wars name on it, and a bunch of other people who either dislike and actively avoid Star Wars content, or people who just don't really care anymore. And the upcoming movie seems to be a stark reminder that the latter seems to be the bulk of the audience these days. But it also hints at the fact that a lot of those people still want to care. If Disney would just make a product that actual fans of the franchise want, and create marketing that actually tries to communicate that with the public, the apathetic subset of the fans might just get excited again. But that's not happening with The Mandalorian and Grogu. At least not yet.
Good shot, baby.
So what do you think? Are you excited at all about The Mandalorian and Grogu? Do you think Star Wars has any chance of regaining its former glory? Why or why not? Join the conversation in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Bye for now. We hope to see you next time in the Culture Wars.